Alrighty, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. As always, you are here with Dr. Fantasy and my co-host, the Fantasy Caveman. We are rolling through our NBA team previews for the 2021-22 season. We're going to be talking about my San Antonio Spurs today, which will be very thrilling. And unfortunately, it follows up our Bulls episode, which actually was very thrilling. And now I have to talk about my disappointing Spurs. But before we do that, make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube, like the YouTube video, share it with your friends. And if you don't want to watch it on YouTube, you can subscribe on Spotify or wherever you listen to audio podcasts as well. So make sure you subscribe. That's the theme. And if you don't, I'm going to just stop talking and I'll never post anything again. So don't make me do that. But let's talk about the Spurs last season and where we see them finishing this upcoming season. Last year, 33 and 39, which was 10th in the Western Conference. Somehow they snuck into the play-in games, and they did not win, but they still snuck in there. Under new head coach Greg Popovich, young blood there for them.
Who's Greg Popovich?
Never heard of him. He sounds hideous. 21st in offensive rating last year. A few random stats here. 21st in offensive rating, 17th in defensive rating. So they were the epitome of average last season. We've mentioned it in previous episodes when we've just talked about really poor three-point shooting teams. They were 22nd in the league in three-point percentage. They actually averaged the fewest amount of three-pointers attempted per game as well. So that's even worse when they were not a strong three-point shooting team last year, but they were also surprisingly 25th in two-point percentage, which I thought was kind of interesting. So they really weren't effective anywhere, for being honest about it. They struggled to rebound. They were 25th in the league in rebounding. They allowed the 8th highest three-point percentage and gave up the 5th most points in the paint. Those are all terrible stats, if you're wondering. Normally, every team we've talked about, I feel like I have something positive to say, but a lot of the Spurs deeper, you can tell that the Spurs don't operate in the new age of basketball where they're looking at analytics, because when you look at their stats, they were winning games, but it wasn't pretty. It honestly wasn't pretty. They did it with some good old school basketball, which I like, but I think they're going to have to adjust that a bit moving forward. So let's talk about some of the stat leaders, and then we'll see who impressed us from last season. DeMar DeRozan, who is no longer with the Spurs, we just talked about him with the Bulls, led the way with 21.6 points. That'll be a big void to fill offensively for them. DeJounte Murray behind him at 15.7, Derek White at 15.4, and then Keldon Johnson at 12.8 points. Rebounds, you have Jacob Podol at 7.9, DeJounte Murray at 7.1, and then Keldon Johnson at 6. Assists, I mentioned in the Bulls episode, DeRozan was a fantastic playmaker last year, 6.9 assists. Then DeJounte Murray behind him with 5.4. And then steals, DeJounte Murray as well, 1.5. Blocks, Podol at 1.8. And Derek White actually averaged one block a game at the guard position. So, Caveman, who impressed you here from the San Antonio Spurs?
Man, I mean, that's tough. That's really, can't talk about, I'm not really going to talk about DeRozan because he's not there anymore. DeJounte Murray was a bit impressive to me. He's always gonna be solid defensively. He's made a defensive team already in his young career. He's only 24. He improved his career high in points by 4 points a game, averaging almost 16 points. Average over 7 rebounds too. So he's one of the few guys where you'd look at the Spurs like, okay, this guy has upside. Can't say that about many guys on the Spurs if we're being honest. Not a lot of the Spurs. I mean, you got him, and I'm sure a guy you're gonna bring up is Keldon Johnson. But other than them two, nobody has really a ton of upside on them. So I'm gonna say DeJounte Murray. Now he needs to, like everybody on the Spurs pretty much, he needs to improve shooting the ball. needs to improve his 3-point percentage. He was only at just about 32% from 3 last year. Not good. Didn't even average 1 3-pointer a game. Averaged 0.9 3-pointers made a game. So I think he needs to. His defense is gonna be there. Not worried about that. But I think if he improves a little bit offensively, you're gonna see a guy that he's not quite a star yet, but I think he can easily make that leap this year if he just needs to improve offensively a little bit. But I like him for the kind of what the Spurs are continuing to try to do. We can question whether that's going to work long term, but for how this team is currently constructed, I think DeJounte Murray is the perfect guy that'll lead that charge.
Yeah, and it's really kind of an interesting construction right now. They are a very young team, which the Spurs are not really accustomed to historically. And we talked about this quite a bit last year with their team preview, but I'm not sure if Pop is necessarily willing to adjust how he coached to the modern NBA. And I think we're starting to see where it's not as successful. But their average age right now is 20. I had to look it up because I knew it was young, but it's 24 and a half years old right now. So they're one of the younger teams in the entire NBA heading into next season. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, DeJounte Murray, I think, made the biggest strides of anybody last season. I mean, he already has that. He's an all-world defender, and he's going to continue to be that for them. But I was surprised that he was a lot better offensively. And you mentioned not very effective from the three-point line, but he still was effective as a whole. So I'm interested to see. A lot of the theme with the Spurs here is somebody's got to step up. They don't have any even borderline all-star players right now. And the
Yeah,
reality is somebody's.
DeRozan's
Yeah, I mean, that was their all star. They have nobody right now. So one of these guys is going to have to say, hey, I'm going to step up and be the Spurs' next all star. And DeJounte Murray, I think, has that potential. Keldon Johnson, I do think, has that potential. He took a jump last year, averaging almost 13 points and 6 rebounds a game. But I'm not gonna lie. I was a little, I don't want to say discouraged, but I thought he could have done more last season. He had some big games, but he was playing a lot of minutes, and there was times where he was very quiet. He's only 21 years old, so I'm not saying give up on the guy or anything crazy like that, but he's gonna have an opportunity to take a big step forward. So I don't want to necessarily say he was impressive last season, but I think he at least has the opportunity to prove that he can be a star player. I think Greg Popovich obviously has some level of faith in him, taking him to the Olympics, taking him through that experience. I don't think that was a coincidence that he was on that roster. I think Greg Popovich is trying to mold Keldon Johnson into the next all-star Spurs player, but he's got a lot to prove. I feel like a lot of people are saying, hey, Keldon Johnson's the next Spurs superstar, but he has a lot to prove. And I think people are, I don't want to say unfairly because he has a lot of talent, but he has a lot to prove before he's deserves that title. So he's a guy I'm going to take a ton in fantasy. I said I was going to mention that a few episodes ago, but somebody's going to have to average around 20 points for this. I mean, maybe nobody does, and this is just going to be a well-rounded scoring unit, but somebody's going to have to be the go-to scorer, and Keldon Johnson has that chance.
Keldon, to me, you look at this team, it's going to be Keldon Johnson or DeJounte Murray. Are we expecting, now the question is, do we expect Murray to make another almost 5 points per game jump again? So we'll have to, will he improve as a 3-point shooter? I think that's, if he can improve as a 3-point shooter, I could definitely see a situation where DeJounte Murray is averaging around 20 a game. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I mean, he realistically made that jump from last year or 2 years ago to this year, so he could definitely make that jump again. I do want to shout out Derek White a little bit, who I think is very underrated just as a whole. 15 points, 3 rebounds, 3.5 assists. He's a very quality role player for them, and no one really talks about him, so I want to just shout him out. A good defender, a good team player. He's a classic Greg Popovich guy. So yeah, but he played really well for me. He averaged almost 4 more points in the previous year. So Derek White was pretty impressive for me as well. So let's talk about their offseason moves. Apparently, I have to talk about the draft. which I would
Yeah.
rather not. But they took and they took Joe Wickscamp in the second
Yeah.
round.
I don't know. You cut out a little bit during your
Did I? That's really odd. I don't
cut
know how
out.
that happened. But yeah, they took Josh Primo in the first round, about 30 picks too early. I mean, I don't. I believe was the youngest player in the draft. He's only 18 years old. He's very raw. Obviously, Pop in the Spurs front office likes his upside. I mean, to me, you
There's
probably could have traded down and got the guy if
those
you really wanted him.
rumors. There was actually rumors that the Thunder were looking at him with one of their first round picks.
Oh God.
There's rumors that the Thunder were looking at him at 16. I believe
Well,
they
they could
had.
have had him.
So there was rumors that the Thunder were looking at him at 16. So clearly he deserved, not saying deserved, but apparently people were a little bit higher on him than everybody else. But so I mean the draft. I don't know. You talk about and we talk you talk about the fact all the time how Greg Popovich doesn't really throw rookies out there too much out the gate.
Mm-mm.
I don't. I feel like this might be a bit of a different situation. I think that Josh Primo, maybe not game one, but I think he's going to play a little bit more than other rookies have the past few years for San
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this team actually is going to have a lot of depth, and I don't see at this point in his career. I don't see Greg Popovich changing that. If we're being honest, Devin Vassell was just taken a pick earlier than Primo last season, and he barely played until the end of last year. So I don't see Pop changing that philosophy at this point. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see what happens with Primo. Obviously, they have a lot of faith in. I keep making fun of the pick about how upset I am. I just liked a lot of the names there, and I felt like they could have done better. But don't get me wrong, I'm not rooting against him. I hope he becomes a superstar, but
You
I guess
will
I'm
now,
just.
and then you will hate
Uh,
yourself for eternity.
I mean, I don't shy away from saying what I feel. I'll say something very strong. But he's 18. That's so young and so raw that it's too early in his career. We're talking it could be 4 years before we're even talking about him as a consistent type of presence in any sort of lineup. So we're a far ways away from that. So we'll see what happens. I guess as a Spurs fan, you're just used to winning. So you want to see a guy that can help you win now. And I don't think that's Primo. And I guess that's why it's disappointing. But they did make a lot of other moves. Now, not guys that are big star quality names like the Bulls, but they added Chandler Hutchinson, Doug McDermott, Thad Young, Al Farouk Aminu, Zach Collins, and Bryn Forbes, which was just a few days ago. And then they lost a few guys as well. DeMar DeRozan, as we mentioned, Rudy Gay, Trey Lyles, Patty Mills, Gorgie Dieng, played a few minutes off the bench for him. What do you think of this offseason as a whole,
I mean,
Caveman?
this is weird because you look at the guys they lost. They were like Spurs mold guys. You know, DeRozan's been their really only All-Star caliber player for the past 3-4 seasons. You lost a guy like Rudy Gay, which at this point in his career I think was a decent fit with San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
Patty Mills you lost. These are all guys that I thought were decent, like kind of part of the Spurs culture, and now they're gone. So this is a weird spot. I mean, they did bring back Bryn Forbes, like you said, who fresh off a championship with Milwaukee. But I, in the scheme of things, it's the only thing that I'm really questioning with this, and we'll get into it when we talk about next season. Where's their scoring going to come from with losing DeRozan? That's pretty much the big thing with the overall team. And that's kind of sad. Not saying DeRozan's like a really bad player, but it's kind of concerning if you're talking about losing DeRozan and that's the huge thing now,
Mm-hmm.
for this team. Because that really speaks to the fact that they don't have anybody consistently offensively. So I don't know. I don't think in the end I don't think it makes that big of a deal because they're not going to be good anyways. So I'm just interested. It's more about the loss of culture to me a little bit because they lost a couple of those Spurs type players.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of to kind of dissect here. I do think that this is going to be a deep team this year. I'm going to talk about the depth chart while I'm talking about this too. Patty Mills to me is one of the saddest losses. I loved the veteran presence he brought off of the bench. And I love the way Patty Mills plays. He's going to be a great fit in Brooklyn, and that was a great pickup for them. But this is a young team, and I feel like you need some sort of veteran leadership, and I don't really know. I guess that's coming from Pop, but
If Pop laces him up,
he's a great grandpa Pop at this point. Not even grandpa. He's a great grandpa at this point. But yeah, I mean, so let's look at their depth chart, and I'll talk about it kind of simultaneously. In the backcourt right now, DeJounte Murray and Derek White are listed as their starters in the backcourt. I think they'll be fine there. That's a very nice defensive pairing. I think the Spurs are going to be improved defensively. When you look at who's behind them, they don't really have a strong ball handler coming off the bench right now. I love Bryn Forbes. I think he's going to bring a lot of energy and defensive hustle back to the Spurs. Trey Jones, though, is listed as a primary or backup point guard right now. That was a guy that we really liked in last year's draft.
He's gonna have a role He's gonna have a lot more of a role this year than last year because remember, DeRozan was their primary ball handler last year. So
yeah,
and Trey Jones, I think Trey Jones is a better ball handler and distributor than DeJounte Murray.
Oh man, that's bold. I don't know. I don't think you're giving DeJounte Murray enough credit here. But another guy who I actually was going to mention and guys that impressed from last season. I don't know about impressed, but I really like Lonnie Walker off the bench. Actually, I think he's a very high energy guy that can be. I keep saying the Jordan Clarkson mold for these guys like Kobe White and Lonnie. I'm not saying that they're going to become Jordan Clarkson, but just a similar mold, a very high scoring punch off of the bench. And Lonnie only averaged 6 points a year before. He averaged over 11 last season. So he made a lot of strides offensively, and I was impressed with that. So we'll see if he can take another step forward because realistically, he's probably going to be their number one scoring option off the bench. So he's going to have an opportunity once again to take another step forward. At the 3, they have Doug McDermott listed right now, and then Devin Vassell and Chandler Hutchinson behind him. Vassell will mix in the backcourt as well. At the 4, you have Keldon Johnson, Thad Young, Al Farouk Aminu, and then at the 5, Jacob Podol, Zach Collins, and Drew Eubanks. I don't know. Like, they have a lot of names here. I feel like this is going to be a team. I have a feeling nobody's going to play like 30 minutes. Maybe DeJounte Murray will, but I think
that's what I was thinking. I'm looking at DeJounte Murray's minutes right now. So in the past, he went obviously 2019 was at 25.6, and last year he played almost 32. So I think DeJounte Murray is a guy you're probably going to see around 33, 34 minutes. I think he's going to play quite a bit. But he honestly, I think DeJounte Murray, maybe Keldon Johnson, I think those two guys are the only ones that are going to play 30 minutes a game.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. And I think the rest of it, it's just going to be very scattered. The one thing that I'm kind of hesitant about is what did we say their biggest weakness was when we started this episode? 3-point shooting. And if we're being honest about it, I don't know if I see the big improvement in 3-point shooting with any of the moves that they've made. I mean, McDermott he's a career 40% 3-point shooter. He's definitely a strong 3-point shooter. Don't get me wrong, but beyond McDermott, I mean, Devin Vassell has the ability to be a very high level 3-point shooter.
The problem is I don't think he's going to play enough.
I wanted to see him in the starting lineup somehow, but I don't see it happening. this year. I don't think.
Yeah, no, they're good. I think Doug McDermott starts from day one.
Yeah, I mean, they're paying Doug McDermott a lot of money. I mean, let's just talk about how he's making almost like $20 million or something crazy like that a year. They extended Derek White for 4 years at about $16 million a year. So Derek White's a part of their plan for the next 4 years. Doug McDermott, I believe, also signed a 4-year contract. So, I mean, I guess these got 3-year contracts. Sorry, $18 million average a year for, or 14 million for Doug McDermott, so a decent sized contract for him. But yeah, I mean, he's going to help improve the 3-point shooting. But I think overall with the Spurs, in order for them to be better this year, they didn't go out there and necessarily. I think Zach Collins, if he stays healthy, actually has some potential down on the post as well. He's never been able to stay healthy, but he's shown some flashes. But I think it's a matter of just these young guys they have taking another step forward. I think that's the reality of this team is if they want to win, these young guys are going to have to play better. They're going to have to step up and say, hey, there's no Kawhi, Duncan, Manu, Parker. It's our time, and this is a new era of Spurs basketball. But at this point, it's hard to sit here and say it's I mean, I think Pop is grooming Keldon to be that guy. Keldon and Murray can be their combo, but is that a championship level combo that the Spurs are used to? I don't know, and I don't think anyone can say yes
I
or
don't know
no.
about that. I think you mentioned the thing is this entirely if Greg Popovich tries to embrace it's at this point in his career. If I'm Popovich, why try to embrace the new NBA at this point? Why? What's the point? I think these players have a chance to be something decent in kind of the new age NBA type system, because I think guys like Gasol and Forbes and even Primo, I think they could thrive in a new type NBA system. It's that in Greg Popovich's system, which is why I get where you're coming from with Josh Primo not playing a lot this year. But if Greg Popovich knows what's best for the Spurs, Josh Primo has it step in one of their top couple 3-point shooters out the gate. You look at these guys on this team that have real 3-point potential. Josh Primo has a chance to be one of the best, maybe a top 2 or 3-point shooter on his team. He can flat out score the basketball, Josh Primo. So I really hope Popovich changes his ways and lets Primo play. Not because I have him in our dynasty. That has nothing to do with it.
Nothing.
Nothing. But I really think if this team's gonna be competitive and all, they're gonna have to start shooting some threes. Like you said, they were last in 3-point attempted. And it is what's frustrating about this is they have guys that can shoot the three. You have guys like Bryn Forbes, Derek White can shoot a little bit, Keldon Johnson can shoot a little bit, Gasol can shoot a little bit, McDermott can. They have 3-point shooters on the team. Mm-hmm. I think it is a matter of philosophy at this point with Greg Popovich, which really caps their upside. And this kind of just leads into, might as well talk about where they're going to finish next year now that we're into it. To be honest, they're not going to make the playoffs. I don't think especially in the West. And we talk about, I think they overachieved a little bit last year. For being the 33 and 39. I would be shocked unless Greg Popovich magically decides to switch up his system after 55 years of coaching. Unless he magically decides to switch that up, I would be surprised if this team won 30 games. And as sucks as they have talent, I think DeJounte Murray could take a step forward, so can Keldon. But the rest of the league got stronger. Not just we've talked about it with the East several times. I think the West got stronger as a whole as well. And the Spurs really didn't follow suit and improve that much. So unless Popovich decides to switch it up a little bit, I think this team regresses and struggles to hit 30 games and is probably a bottom 3 team in the Western Conference. I think Pop, he can only do so much. I think not saying it's time for him to hand it up, but I think it's time for him to, if he wants to stay coaching, he's going to have to switch it up or hang him up at this point, because this team doesn't have those type of players anymore. They don't have a Tim Duncan. They don't have a Manu Ginobili. They don't have a Tony Parker. This is a team that could do something if they were playing new age basketball, but he's not, so they're not going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to disagree a little bit.
Okay.
And call me biased, because maybe I probably am. But I just, do I think this team is less talented today than it is a year ago? I'm going to be in the minority here, but I don't think so, because I think that the jumps that all of these guys collectively make, with Doug McDermott helping out a little bit, and it's sad that we're talking about Doug McDermott making that big of an impact, but
that might be part of the problem.
But I think collectively, if you see DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie, Devin Vassell, maybe Primo throws some minutes in there. If you see all of these guys collectively improve just by a small amount, I think that equals more than what they lost with DeRozan. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but I think that they're going to just play a team-oriented game, because they're going to have to, unless somebody, because they don't really have that star-level player. So I think it opens them up to be
not really just, that Popovich's system's not going to allow for a star-level player.
Yeah, he's going to have to build it that way if they're going to win. This is going to have to be a team that plays that classic Spurs style, because they don't have anyone. If they're struggling offensively, you're not like, just give Kawhi the ball and he'll help us out tonight. Like, you can't do that anymore. So I don't count Pop out. If we're looking at it, I don't think that this team's going to be much worse than it was last season. And if I'm looking at teams below them that could potentially pass them, I still think that they could finish higher than the Thunder. I mean, they're going to. The Timberwolves, the Kings, the Pelicans, the Rockets. I think they can still finish higher than all of those teams. And I think that the reality is, we can look at this roster.
I think the Kings can finish ahead of them this year.
They can, but if we're being honest about it, we're just being disrespectful to the legend of Greg Popovich if we're saying that they don't have because we said this last season. We're like, this team has no talent. They're not going to be anywhere. And there they were, right in the playoff conversation. I'm not saying they're going to finish in the top 8 or anything, but do I think that they'll probably be 8, 9, or 10 with a chance at the play-in game? I do think. I mean, just based off of the way that Pop coaches, he's going to have these guys play as a unit. They're going to be tougher defensively. Their 3-point shooting can't be any worse. It'll be a little improved at least. So I think when you factor all that in, this will be like a 33, 34, 35 win team this season, and they'll be a borderline playoff play-in team.
I mean, wouldn't shock me. That feels like a cop-out because,
It is.
It is. It wouldn't shock me, but I honestly see them struggling to hit 30 wins. I think they're going to be right around 29, 30 wins. So they're going to be worse. To me, they're going to be worse by 3 or 4 games. And I think that knocks them from 10th to 11th or 12th. So.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting season because they're more than any other Spurs season in my entire lifetime. There are tons of question marks. So it'll be at least an interesting season to monitor. So we appreciate you guys listening in. Next, we're going to have the Charlotte Hornets. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube and wherever you're listening to podcasts. That'll be a fun episode. Lots to talk about there as well.
There is nobody that's important on that team.
Nobody cares about that team except everybody. So we'll talk about that next. Make sure you subscribe. See you guys next time.